Before we start, yes, I know this was aired as a single episode, but it was filmed as two, and if we try to do it all in one go, this video will be 40 minutes long and melt my brain in the process. That's why you're getting it in halves. For better or worse, the days when I could cram a whole pilot episode into 4 minutes are long gone. With that out of the way, let us begin. We open to some Borg stomping around corridors. A voice says they've detected a ship, and we see on a screen that it's Voyager, which shouldn't come as too much of a surprise given the name of the show. The Borg vessel closes, but we discover it's neither a D6 nor a tactical testicle, this new design resembling a glowing green suppository. How appropriate, as it's approaching Voyager's arse. Threats happen, but Janeway doesn't care. She thinks Voyager's guns match this new ship, so we start pooping at each other. Some minor kabooms on the Borg bum pill cause them to fiddle with their shields, during which one of Voyager's fireworks gets teleported aboard. This poor bugger here gets the job of disarming it, but not for long. The suppository kabooms spectacularly, much to the distress of Chakotay. Apparently the plan was to disable it, but someone teleported the firework next to a critical system, so that's that bollocks. All the drones are dead, and the ship got proper kaboomed, but Janeway wants to try and salvage what she can. We scoop up the juiciest parts of the wreckage and stick it in Seven's cargo bay. As Janeway is inspecting bits, she's saying that she's tired of running from the Borg, complaining that avoiding them has added 2 years to their journey. I guess the start of Season 4 wasn't the end of Borg territory. The salvage operation is mostly a bust. There are some odd parts and the dock gets a new toy, but anything impressive is shagged as all the really serious Borg equipment is designed to self-destruct, according to Seven. But they have found some data storage devices, the same things we used to feed knowledge to Borg Jesus at the start of the season, and Seven says they've got juicy tactical data on. Janeway wants what's on them, maybe thinking that information on ship movements will let us chart a shortcut. Let's move to astrometrics to take a look. The maps they find show there are a few ships relatively near to Voyager, though Seven assures us there's nothing directly in our path. Janeway's seen something else though, a Borg tactical testicle that, due to storm damage, is only moving at warp 2 while it repairs. Janeway likes what she sees and, after moving to the briefing room, runs through what she's thinking. A Borg transwarp what's-it, the doohickeys they use to travel super fast, would cut decades off their trip. We couldn't nab one from the ship we kaboomed because it's one of the things that gets automatically wrecked, but this is a different matter, a ship that's functional but vulnerable, and Janeway thinks we can create a diversion, sneak in, rob the bastards, and fuck off again before we get rumbled. Everyone has ideas for how to make it work, which, if the Season 2 and 3 finales are anything to go by, means it's all going to fall apart. They all go off to make preparations while Janeway talks to Seven in her ready room. We have a source of data that we've not been using, and Janeway thinks it's time to correct that. Seven's parents were trailing a Borg D6 for multiple years to study them, and we've got the logs from their ship. As an aside, the vessel in question was a wreck that tumbled over a cliff after being pooped at. Tuvok and Seven were inside only briefly, and then we legged it at speed, so I don't see how we accessed the ship's computers, but let's ignore that for now. Anywho, the logs might have information that's useful to us, but Seven's been avoiding them because of the baggage they come with. Janeway thinks Seven's the best person to review them, but says she'll get Chakotay to do it, if necessary. Seven relents and says she'll read them, but she's clearly not delighted by the prospect. Maybe it's because it'll be so bloody cumbersome. Neelix delivers the first batch of their logs, a whole box of tablets. Quite why basic alphanumeric data takes up so much space as to be spread over multiple devices, when Seven's implants can store the personalities of literally hundreds of people, I'm not sure, but let's ignore that for now. Neelix tries to spark up a conversation, though it's not just his customary attempt at being nosy. All he has to remember his family by is a single image of his sister. To him, this much information on Seven's parents is a valuable hoard to be envied. If it's a deliberate attempt by him to reframe the situation, then I'm impressed. Seven seems to give it thought, and as he leaves to fetch the next batch, she begins to read. Time for a flashback, and young Seven's dad is telling her that his models aren't toys, an attitude first invented some 300 years previously by Warhammer players. He's been given permission by an exobiology council to go and poke the Borg, who at this point were largely unknown, and is explaining to young Seven that this will mean being away from Earth for quite some time. But hey, maybe the Borg have kids too. Maybe you can be friends. The next flashback is some time later, and young Seven's parents are bickering, a way of telling the viewer that they've gone rogue and ignored orders to abort their trip. Young Seven enters, complaining that she can't sleep, and the computer starts beeping just to make sure it stays that way. They found some science wibblies, and her parents set to work, young Seven's dad dismissing her with a single word. What an absolute cock. As she watches from the door to her bedroom, we see the wibblies are a Borg D6. The Borg scan them, but they clearly aren't interested enough to check it out and just keep flying. Mum and Dad set course to follow, and the flashback ends as Seven is called to the bridge. We've caught up with that tactical testicle and a matching course to follow, an uncomfortably familiar situation for Seven. She regains control and goes to a console. Scans show the battle bollock is working on getting weapons back before moving to shields and transwarp drive. Seven estimates they'll be done in 3 days, news that makes Janeway tell everyone that we'll be working around the clock on our plan to rob them. We're in the middle of some Borg, where 2 teams from Voyager are working on different goals. Tuvok and Kim are off to explode a thing, Janeway and Seven will try to swipe the transwarp gizmo, and Chakotay's on the bridge, timing them. Kabooms happen and the gizmo in question gets teleported away. The 2 teams converge after a bit of pooping at Borg drones, only some of which is effective, before teleporting away themselves. The Borg get in on the teleporting fun times and put some of theirs on Voyager. Chakotay pauses the program, what with us being on the holodeck and all, so we can run through what went wrong. In short, we took too long. Knocking out some sensors gives us a way in, but they regenerate in 2 minutes and we keep running over. Alternatives have been explored, so this is our best available plan, but only if we can find a way of making it work. Seven might be able to help with that. She says her parents, who I note she refers to as the Hansons, were able to stay on a Borg ship for hours without issue. She's not quite sure how yet, so Janeway tells her to keep looking. On the way, Janeway's asking if Seven's all right. She froze briefly during one of the simulations and admits to finding the environment disturbing, but claims she'll manage. Back in the cargo bay, she's opening another box of tablets when Naomi arrives. She's had a bad dream and neither Ensign Mum nor Neelix are free, so she wants to spend time here with Seven. She's worried about the mission and keeps asking questions, refusing to stop when Seven tells her to. Borg gubbins sprout on her face and drones step from regeneration alcoves in a cargo bay that's significantly more green than it was a moment ago. Seven calls for security and is told by a distinctly regal voice that they can't hear her. Seven tries to ignore it and convince herself that this is a dream, but the voice assures her that it isn't. She says they've used the Borg gubbins in Seven's head to talk to her and that they know all about Voyager's plan. But there's a deal to be made. Voyager will be spared if Seven willingly rejoins the collective. The drones and green lighting disappear to leave Seven standing alone in the middle of her cargo bay. Let's have another log entry from the terrible parents. They followed the D6 through a transwarp conduit, finding themselves in the Delta Quadrant. Now Dad's trespassing so he can observe the locals in their natural habitat and send back camera footage. He's not been rumbled because of a gizmo he's wearing, shielding him from their sensors. Presumably the individual drones are operating on the principle we've heard before, that they won't attack unless they perceive a threat. Regardless, that's the data Seven needed in the present. The bicep-mounted toy masks biological signals, so Tuvok wants 4 of them for the away team and orders the dog to start configuring them. While the doc works, he and Seven briefly discuss her parents. Her feelings on them are a little more mixed now. She even refers to them once as her parents rather than the Hansons, but only in a sentence where she calls them arrogant and blames them for what happened to her. It's fair to say she still has some stuff to work through. Perhaps she, Paris and B'Elanna should form a support group for people with shit parents. They could open each meeting with a recital of This Be the Verse by Philip Larkin. Tomorrow's the big day, and Janeway's checking up on Seven, still concerned about her ability to handle things. So much so that she's been taken off the away team and will advise from Voyager. Seven's distraught by the decision and runs through all the ways she's needed on the team. Janeway isn't swayed, suspecting there's more to this than Seven is letting on. Seven makes it personal, saying the Voyager crew matter to her and she's willing to risk herself to improve the odds. As an aside, this is a spectacularly skillful bit of lying by omission, a line that makes it sound like she's just showing general concern, but also covers that deal she was offered in the maybe dream, maybe not. 1,000,000 points for whoever wrote that. The display is enough to convince Janeway, and Seven's back on the team going over to the Borg tactical testicle. That's assuming any of them are going, of course. The time to try their plan has come, but those pesky Borg aren't taking the bait, in this case a big juicy shuttlecraft. It's even one of the nice ones. We're making it pretend to have life signs aboard so it looks more enticing, but the buggers are just ignoring it. Janeway suggests powering up its warp drive, presumably to make it look like it's going to Scarpa, and that does the job. As the Borg lower their freshly repaired shields to tractor it in, the away team teleports over. Nobody gets immediately murdered, so I guess those biocloaks are working. Either that or they don't recognize Kim as a person, just like the writers for the last 5 years. Everything's going according to plan, apart from Seven having a bit of a wibble where she remembers being a Borg and hears that voice in her head again. Things kaboom, the transwarp Whatsit gets teleported out, and they make their way to the escape point. All except Seven, who stops when hearing that voice call her name once more. She's decided the deal was not a dream and tells Janeway that she plans to stay. Janeway's less than ecstatic at this news, especially given the timing, and points a gun at her. A Borg shield scuppers that threat and Seven tells her to go. That might not be bad advice either. The Borg battle bollock has noticed Voyager and is coming over to say hi, and those biocloak things don't work anymore. That's assuming they ever did, of course. Janeway, Tuvok and Kim teleport back to Voyager. Once they reach the bridge, Chakotay tells them that the Borg ship has changed course, now moving away from them and getting ready to use the remaining transwarp Whatsits. It does a bit of green glowing, then fucks off. The area it reappears in looks very Borgy indeed. It docks somewhere, and Seven's taken to a room with a familiar-looking head and shoulders. The Borg Queen welcomes Seven home, saying her experiences of life after being removed from the collective will be most useful and add to the Borg's perfection. Indeed, she says that's why she allowed it to happen in the first place. A confused Seven wants answers but is told to regenerate, so she, and we, will have to wait for an explanation, as this story is to be continued. So, the Borg are back, and seemingly out of nowhere. As far as the viewer is concerned, we've not seen Borg since a scout at the start of the season caught wind of Borg Jesus, and we've scarpered about 10,000 light-years since then thanks to the Doctor Who credit sequence mode in the episode Timeless. Janeway says they've been avoiding Borg D6s for a while, but we've not had a single mention of it. It's another example of that favourite bugbear of mine, the general lack of continuity. What makes it more frustrating is that we've had opportunities to throw in the odd hint during previous episodes. The damaged ship in Nothing Human had the chance to mention traces of a Borg weapons signature. In Counterpoint, the line about Seven's implants being potentially telepathic could have been expanded to include "we are no strangers" to such things. Planet Shipwreck in Gravity would have been no different narratively for featuring a visibly recognisable Borg ruin on the horizon, needing no other mention of them. We've been doing this for so long that these misses no longer come as a surprise, but that doesn't make them any easier to swallow, especially when this was clearly a big event. Let's talk about the Raven's logs. Not about how we got them, as based on what we know there isn't a particularly good excuse for that, but instead about their ownership. When Janeway brings up the topic with Seven, she says she'll give the logs to Chakotay if needed, but does she have the authority to do so? Seven's parents were Federation, not Starfleet. Even if you believe that Starfleet should have access to all Federation research, which is questionable in itself, then that relies on the data belonging to the relevant Federation Council to begin with. Seven's parents may have originally had their excursion sanctioned by the Exobiology Council, but that link was broken the second they were ordered to return and chose not to. An organisation disavowing the actions of an individual has no claim to the fruits of their labour. Put more simply, if you cancel your order at a restaurant, you don't get to still eat the food. All of which means that her parents would have been private citizens rather than acting under the council. Anything that remains would be personal property and presumably inherited by Seven when they died. Tangentially, that raises other questions about inheritance from people assimilated by the Borg. They're not technically dead, and are potentially immortal too, with the power of Borg magical brain healing. I wonder if Ferengi life insurance policies have an assimilation clause. Anyway, my point is that unless the concept of property died along with currency, Janeway has no legitimate claim to those research logs. Saying she'll go around Seven if she needs to doesn't really gel with the utopian society we're told the Federation is, and certainly goes against the principles of individuality that she's been trying to champion. Speaking of those logs, the stardates on them are utterly fucked. The first is where they've just been given permission to go on their jaunt. The second, with a date just 4 days later, says they've been tracking Borg readings for 8 months. A third, made 2 days after the second, details following a cube for another 3 months. Inconsequential, of course, but still something that could have been easily fixed. The most interesting point of the episode, of course, is the bombshell that Seven's removal from the collective was intentional. That's the claim made by the Borg Queen anyway, and it doesn't really hold up to much scrutiny, but let's put that to one side for a moment. I confess I find something quite appealing about the idea of Voyager's miraculous escapes from the Borg being the result of meticulous planning by others rather than their own abilities. The idea of the collective sacrificing their own for the purpose of data gathering checks out, and this feels like just the sort of sociology experiment you'd expect to see from someone who stuck meat on a robot to see what would happen. It's a sufficiently compelling plot element to drive the second half, and I'm curious to see how it'll play out. End of episode.
What's the brown one?
Leola root.
What's the red one?
Leola root.
What?
Leola root, but a different variety.
Oh, okay. So what's the green one?
That's Leola root too.
Another one?
Yes.
But that doesn't make any sense.
It's Leola root. They're all Leola root. All the fruit, all the veg, even that meat over there. Everything that's ever come out of this kitchen is Leola root. You know that cake you had yesterday?
The one I said tasted like Leola. Oh, for fuck's sake. Why has he got so many different types of Leola root?
I don't know for certain, but I think it's because he hates the crew and is trying to poison them.
Oh, that's fair enough then. Woof.